Hello again, it's Alan Macon, the local history tutor for Knowsley Face, with a continuing series of short videos on the local history of Knowsley and Liverpool throughout the centuries. This particular short video is entitled The Mersey Ferries, which will document the local history of the ferries from the Middle Ages, the 1100s, right up to the present day. We'll look at archive photographs and maps to plot the development over many centuries, and eventually we'll finish off in the present day and looking at arguably its most famous passenger and song ferry across the Mersey. So we'll start off by looking at a black and white photograph of the ferries in their heyday, when they were at their most popular. Literally millions and millions of people every year took the journey from one side of the Mersey to the other, and this led to the development of lots of ferries over the years, ferry boats, as well as the local landing stages. So I'll just zoom in and we'll have a look at Liverpool, the pierhead in 1895. So as you can see, it's hugely packed. Boat upon ferry boat are coming in, small, relatively small by a modern standard of boats. The pierhead in the background with the tall ships probably towards George's Dock. And all the ladies in the long dress, the height of the late Victorian boom in ferry services. So we continue the story of the ferries over many centuries. It starts way back in the Middle Ages in the year 1150. When Liverpool didn't even exist. Liverpool, as far as we know, didn't really start till its royal charter in 1207. But on the other side of the Wirral, of the Mersey, on the Wirral, in 1150, the Benedictine Priory at Birkenhead, still there today, but it's been in ruins for hundreds of years, was established. The monks used to charge a small fee to row across the Mersey, the very small rowing boats. If you jump forward in time, in 1330, in the reign of King Edward III, he granted a charter to the priory and its successor. And in the charter, it went on to claim the right of ferry there for men, horses and goods, with leave to charge reasonable tolls. Obviously, we still have tolls today when you go through the tunnel. I think it's about £1.80 for your car to go through the Mersey tunnel. So them tolls have been in existence since the Middle Ages. If you jump forward in time, you come to the 1700s, the 18th century. By the 18th century, the commercial expansion of Liverpool, with the beginning of the docks and trade with North America, and increase in stagecoach traffic from Chester, spared the growth of the transportation of passengers across the river. Between about 1750 and 1830, that's the beginning of the railway age, more and more stagecoach was coming to Liverpool, which were coming from Liverpool from the Wirral side. Eventually, by the early 1800s, they were leaving for the Midlands and also on to London. So this led to the growth of transportation of passengers across the river. Ferry services to Rock Ferry on the Wirral began in 1709, and by 1753, the Cheshire side of the Mersey had ferries running from Ince, Easton, Woodside and Seacombe. The service from New Ferry to Liverpool was first mentioned in 1774. And again, if I just zoom in, this is a map about 1901, and we can see the various locations the ferries went: New Brighton, Egremont, Seacombe, Woodside, right down to Rock Ferry. So this is Liverpool and the Wirral side in the year 1901. If you move on again, as the ferry population of Merseyside, what became Merseyside, grew, it grew on the Liverpool side of the Mersey, but eventually the Wirral will catch up. In 1800, the population of Wirral was population of Birkenhead was only a small town, population probably no more than 2,000 people, but eventually it grew. And as it grew, it wanted better transport links. So this led to development of Birkenhead, and this is a photograph of Birkenhead where the ferries came in, the slipway. The old Birkenhead ferry terminus around 1850, just 50 years before that. Birkenhead was a very, very small town. If you continue the theme of the history of the ferries, if you jump forward to the First World War, in 1914, King George V and Queen Mary travelled on the ferry, the SS Daffodil, from Wallasey to Liverpool. During the First World War, the steamers the Iris and Daffodil, as they were then known, were taken out of service from Wallasey to be used as troop ships in the naval raid on Zeebrugge in Belgium. They both saw action, were fired upon and sustained heavy damage, but made their way back to the River Mersey. Because of their work, King George V allowed the vessels to use the word royal in their names, so they became the Royal Iris and the Royal Daffodil. They needed extensive refitting before they could consume peacetime activities after the First World War, 1918-19. If we move on again, this is a photograph of the famous two ferries, but just zoom in, the Iris and the Daffodil to become the Royal Irish and Royal Daffodil, being escorted into the Mersey, and they said they were very badly damaged, but they managed to survive. If you move on to the 1950s, it says, in 1950, the ferry carried almost 30 million passengers a year, including 11 million on the Woodside ferries and 15 million on the Seacombe ferries. But by 1970, the total number of passengers fell to only 7 million, and obviously it continues to fall decade upon decade to the present year. Perhaps the most famous royal is the Royal Iris of 1951. She was the best loved of all the Mersey ferries, with her smooth lines and the first diesel-powered engine of the Wallasey fleet. She played host to hundreds of party cruisers and bands such as Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Searchers, the Beatles and Elvis Costello. Have you got any memories of going on this ship in the 60s, 70s, 80s? She received a major refit in the 1970s, and a popular fish and chips cafe earned her the name the Fish and Chip Boat, which again was removed and replaced with a steak bar. The Royal Iris remained in service until 1993, when it was sold, and just 2 years later, goes on to say, she was used as a floating nightclub. She is now berthed at Woolwich in London. And we'll just zoom in. So this is the Royal Iris from 1951 in her heyday in the 1980s. Have you got any memories? Can you remember going on board the ship? Did you see the Beatles? And at the bottom, we've got the rusting wreck of the Royal Iris on the River Thames at Woolwich. That's what it looks like today, I'm afraid. Lastly, I'd like to look at the connections with the Liverpool's famous Mersey beat, and arguably its most famous passenger, Jerry Marsden, and his song Ferry Across the Mersey. So we zoom in, we have a ticket for the Grand River Cruise, dated September 1962, and the Beatles, one of the star acts. Then there's Jerry himself, Jerry Marsden, and the Ferry Across the Mersey, the famous #1 hit back in the day in the 1960s. Did you see Jerry on board singing his famous song, Ferry Across the Mersey? It became so famous by the mid-1960s, 1965, a film was made starring Jerry and the Pacemakers entitled Ferry Across the Mersey, which stars big stars in the 1960s, Cilla Black, The Foremost, Julia Samuel, the Black Knights. Did you remember this film? Did you go to this film in the mid-1960s? I'd like to stop there, and as usual, just like to say thank you for watching. Please leave any comments you wish. Please stay tuned to Knowsley Face and Knowsley Recovery website for any tips on mental health and well-being. Thank you.